The stones were warm in Sael's fist, and the hunters were close enough that she could hear them breathing. Not their footfalls, the Rekhari moved without sound, which was the whole point of being Rekhari, but their breath came in long, pressurized pulls through the filter slits above their chins, and in the dead-still air of the canyon at nightfall, that sound carried. 3 of them, maybe 4. Sael had stopped counting and started running instead, which her mother had always said was the correct order of operations when it came to the Rekhari. She had been running for 2 days. The canyon floor was red ochre sandstone, and she knew it the way she had known it all her life, or she had known it before the outpost burned, before the transport left without her, before being safe became a memory instead of a fact. Now the canyon was just obstacles. Loose shale, a dry channel that dropped 3 meters without warning, overhangs that looked solid and weren't. Her left knee had bled, then dried, then pulled tight when she bent it. She kept bending it. The stones in her fist were small, 7 of them, each no larger than a knuckle joint, worn smooth by 10 generations of handling. They were translucent amber, the color of old resin, and in her people's tradition they were not decorative. They were memory. Her mother had pressed them into her hands in the last 3 seconds before the transport door sealed, with the specific focus of someone who understood exactly how much time she had left. "The stones will show you the way," her mother had said. "Let them." Sael had not let them yet. She had been too busy running. She ducked under an overhang, pressed herself flat against the rock, and listened. The breathing stopped. The Rekhari had paused. In the canyon's acoustic geometry, curved walls, narrow throat, hard floor, that meant they were listening too. She had maybe a minute before they triangulated the echo of her last footfall. She had learned that yesterday. She had also learned that the Rekhari did not tire the way she did, and that their interest in her had nothing to do with anything she had done and everything to do with what the stones were. Her grandmother had carried them before her mother, her great-grandmother before that. Each generation had added one, pressing the memory of something important into the resin while it was still warm, folding it closed. 7 stones, 7 memories. The Rekhari knew what they were. The Rekhari collected such things, which was a polite way of saying they took them from the people who had carried them and did not give them back. Sael was 12 years old, and she was not going to let them have her mother's hands. That was how she thought about it. The stones were her mother's hands. The pressure of them in her fist was the pressure of her mother's grip in those last 3 seconds, and she was not releasing that. She opened her hand in the dark under the overhang and looked at the stones. They held a warmth that was not temperature, or not only temperature. She had held them 100 times before without paying attention. She paid attention now. She pressed her thumb to the first stone, the oldest one, worn smoothest. The memory arrived not as words but as knowledge. A woman standing on a ridge above this canyon, looking north, past the twin rock spires her people called the listening pair. Beyond the spires, that was where the water was. That was the direction. Sael looked north. The canyon curved, and she could not see the spires from here, but she knew which curve to follow. She closed her hand around the stones and moved. The Rekhari found her trail 20 minutes later. She heard the breathing resume, 1 pair, then 2, converging, and she stopped counting again and went back to running. The canyon widened as she pushed north, the walls dropping from 30 meters to 15, the floor smoothing where water had once run and left a hard calcite shelf. Faster footing, but no cover. She was visible against the pale stone floor if any of the Rekhari had reached a vantage point above. She pushed harder and kept close to the eastern wall, where a line of old rock fall had left a ragged shadow ridge 3 meters high, and she ran in the shadow and did not think about her knee. The listening pair appeared around the 3rd bend, exactly where the memory had placed them. 2 spires of rust-red stone rising from the canyon floor, 7 meters tall, leaning slightly toward each other as if in conference. She had never seen them in person. She had seen them in her grandmother's hands, and the difference was only that they were realer. Beyond them, that was what the memory said. She pressed through the gap between the spires tight. She had to turn sideways, and the stone scraped her shoulder, and came out the other side into a wider section of canyon, the floor dropping by 2 meters in a shelf that she jumped without thinking and landed hard, knees protesting, stones still clenched in her fist. She looked back. The spires were behind her, no breathing in earshot. She had gained distance. She pressed her thumb to the second stone and moved. The second memory was her great-grandmother, and it was different. Not a direction, but a quality. Unhurried certainty, the exact opposite of panic. Calmness that was not the absence of fear, but the decision to keep moving through it. Her great-grandmother had crossed this canyon when the Rekhari were more numerous, and she had carried 2 children instead of 7 stones. She had walked quickly and thought clearly, and she had come through. Sael did not stop running, but she stopped being afraid in the same way, from flight, pure reflex, to navigation. Same ground, same speed, completely different from the inside. She was still afraid. Fear was information. Her great-grandmother's memory had not said otherwise. The canyon floor began to slope upward, gradually at first and then more steeply, the calcite shelf giving way to loose red shale that slid underfoot and made noise she could not afford. She slowed, picked her steps, used the eastern wall as a handhold. The slope leveled after 30 meters into a narrow saddle, and from the saddle she could see ahead. The canyon's northern mouth, a half-kilometer of open ground, and beyond it pale lights, regular, horizontal, the geometry of something built rather than grown. The human outpost. Her mother had said it was there. Her grandmother's stone had confirmed the direction, but seeing it was different. Seeing it was the specific relief of a thing that has existed only as a story stepping into the category of true. She did not let herself stop. She pressed the third stone, another direction memory, a path through the shale, and kept moving. Behind her, somewhere back in the canyon, the breathing resumed. She was 50 meters from the saddle's edge when the Rekhari appeared on the canyon rim above her. 2 of them moving along the upper lip with the confidence of something that had decided the chase was over. Tall, gray-green, their long limbs folded for walking and capable of unfolding into speed. They were not looking at her. They were looking at the path ahead, calculating where she would be, not where she was. She pressed herself against the eastern wall and went still. The Rekhari hunted by sound. They had found her twice that way. Footfalls on the calcite shelf, the scrape of stone at the listening pair's gap. She controlled her breathing and watched them move along the rim. They were going to reach the saddle before she did, and they would be waiting at the canyon mouth when she came through. She opened her hand and looked at the 7 stones. 4 she had not touched yet. She had been rationing them instinctively, the way you rationed water, using only what the immediate situation required, saving the rest for something worse. This was worse. She pressed the 4th stone. Her mother's memory, recent enough that the edges were still sharp. Not direction, not calm, specific intelligence. The location of a secondary passage, a crack in the western wall at the base of the slope, invisible from above. Her mother had used it once years ago and had pressed the location into the stone in case Sael ever needed it. Sael looked at the western wall and found the crack. It was 30 centimeters wide. She was 12 and not large for 12. She went in sideways, stones clenched to her chest, and moved through the darkness by touch while the Rekhari crossed the saddle above her and waited at the canyon mouth for someone who was not coming. The crack ran for 11 meters. She counted her steps, and opened onto the northern face of the canyon wall, outside the constriction point, on open ground between the stone and the outpost perimeter. Sael stepped out into the cold night air and looked at the lights. Closer than she had expected. A figure moved in the perimeter glow, a human on routine patrol, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing the dark green jacket the frontier service people always wore, carrying a torch that cast a warm yellow circle on the ground. Sael took 3 steps toward the light and then stopped, because the Rekhari were still above the canyon, and she did not know whether the human had seen them or whether the Rekhari could reach her in the open ground before she reached the perimeter. She calculated the distance. She looked at the stones. She had 3 remaining. She had not touched them. Her mother had pressed 7 memories because she had thought 7 might be needed. She pressed the 5th. Her great-great-grandmother this time, and the memory was strange, not direction, not intelligence, but something without a single word. The choice to move toward a hope rather than away from a threat. The distinction was small and enormous at the same time. One made you something running from. The other made you something moving toward. Her great-great-grandmother had moved toward. Sael moved toward. She ran for the perimeter light and she did not look back. And when the human turned at the sound of her footfalls on the hard-packed earth and raised their torch, and she came into the light with her sandy gold skin dust-caked, and her hair half loose and her left knee dried dark where it had bled, she did not stop, and she did not hesitate. She crossed the last 10 meters in a straight line and stopped 2 arm lengths from the human and said, in the trade common language, the 5 words her mother had specifically told her to say. "My name is Sael, I'm alone." The human, a woman, she saw now, dark-eyed, with the weathered face of someone who had spent years at the edge of things, looked at her. Then she looked past her at the canyon wall. Something in her expression changed in the way expressions changed when a person understood a situation faster than they had expected to. Her hand moved to her belt, not a weapon but a radio, and she pressed it once and said something into it in rapid human speech that Sael did not fully follow, but which ended in a word she recognized as their word for child. "Come inside," the woman said in trade common, accented but clear. "Come inside now." She did not reach for Sael's hand. She stepped to the side and put herself between Sael and the canyon, which was better. Sael went inside. They gave her water and a thermal wrap and sat her at a table in a prefabricated building that smelled of metal and coffee substitute. 3 more humans came in. One of them, an older man, gray at his temples, with the tired look of someone who had been managing a problem longer than he'd wanted, sat down across from her. "Rekhari," he said, "in the canyon." "Yes," Sael said. "I counted 3, maybe 4. He nodded, the nod of someone already moving to the next problem. "We'll lock the perimeter and put out a deterrent signal. They don't usually push against it." He looked at her hands. "Those stones, don't let anyone take them for cataloging. Tell them your mother said so. They'll listen." Sael looked at him. "You know what they are." "We get Varesi families through here sometimes. Not often." He paused. "Where are your people?" Sael told him. She kept it brief, the outpost, the Rekhari, the transport that had left, the 2 days in the canyon. His expression did not change much during any of it, which she found easier than if it had. At the end she said, "My mother told me to find you. She said you would send a relay." "We'll send a relay tonight." He said it without qualification, without conditions attached. "If your mother reached the transit corridor, we'll find her." Sael looked down at the stones in her palm. 7 of them, warm, small, worn smooth by 3 generations of worry and love and intelligence, passed from hand to hand. She pressed the 6th stone, a reflex or something like gratitude. Her grandmother again, the oldest stone, worn down to near silence, but what came through was not direction. It was the moment of setting something down, arriving somewhere and allowing it to be enough for now. Not forgetting what had been lost, just releasing the weight of the running briefly in a warm place with people who had said yes when the moment required it. Sael closed her hand around the stones. She had the 7th. She was not going to press it tonight. Some things were for later, when she knew what was needed. The woman who had let her through the perimeter sat down beside her with a cup of something warm and slid it across without comment. Not tea, something sweeter. Sael drank it, and the heat moved through her the way heat moved when you had been cold for a long time without realizing it. Outside, through the outpost's one small window, the canyon walls rose dark against the stars. The Rekhari were still out there, or had moved on. It did not matter from here. "You ran well," the woman said in trade common, as if it were an ordinary thing to say, which it was, which was the correct thing to be. Sael looked at the window. 2 days ago, the stones had been her mother's hands. Tonight they were something else as well, evidence, she supposed, of what it meant to be descended from women who had crossed hard ground before her and left directions. "I had help," she said. The woman nodded, as if that were also an ordinary thing, which it was. Outside, the perimeter deterrent pulsed once, blue-white, and the canyon was quiet.